we're just going to pretend that economics is first, because I put it first on the PowerPoint. So I hope I did that. So this will be 2 days. This is a fair amount of information. And so then this 2-day lecture and last week's 2-day lecture are going to be what will predominantly show up on your test Friday. Okay? Alright? So we're past the word 1812. We're really past sort of the era of good feelings and Monroe. And so we've entered into our next phase of American sort of political history as we get into Jacksonian democracy, which is what we talked about last week, right? So what we've seen is over a period of time in the first half of the 19th century, the United States is going to undergo a significant amount of change. Some of that change is very easy to understand in the sense that we purchased Louisiana, and that increased the size of the country drastically, right? Some other things are a little bit more complex, and you would have to understand sort of connectivity as it pertains, right? Like when we had the embargo of 1787, that's going to create an opportunity and really a necessity of American innovation, right? We're going to start the process of industrialization. And I think I hinted at you already, or I told you already, that when we really talk about American industrialization, when we talk about American industrialization in January, it really is going to occur after the Civil War because there is no incentive to industrialize while we have slaves. Slavery is anti-productive economically.
No, what about the North?
Well, the North is going to start, but the South is going to try to stop them at every chance they get. The North and the South get so acrimonious toward one another, right? Like, yes, sir.
What is that?
Petty, bitter, angry. They're so at odds with one another. Obviously, y'all understand that all railroads have to be the same size. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, and you're looking like you're confused. Why? Because trains are the same size and they have to run on the tracks. Therefore, the tracks would all have to be the same width apart so that the trains could. Yeah? Make sense? Okay, pre-Civil War, that was not accurate. Southern train tracks were slightly more narrow. So basically, you couldn't run a train from like Boston to Atlanta. You'd have to stop somewhere in Maryland or Virginia, I forget exactly where, and transport everything onto a southern train and then run it down to Atlanta, which is sort of asinine. All right? But so slavery is a huge, huge issue that we have to deal with. And so some of these things we've already begun to talk about, but we're going to begin here with sort of the early American understandings of industrialization that is really happening in Europe. The South is still the massive producer of goods in the United States, or they're the massive producer of products. Let's not call them goods, let's call them products, because for the most part it's raw materials. Those raw materials are going to England, and they're being turned into finished goods in England and then sold back to Americans. Okay, so England is undergoing the Industrial Revolution already. America is not, and there's a number of reasons for that, right? One, you really can't have industrialization without urbanization. Okay, and we don't have urbanization yet. We're still way too spread out as a nation. Okay, we're very agrarian at this point. Even in like what we called the middle colonies at the beginning of this semester. I mean, Pennsylvania is still very spread out. If you're not in Philadelphia along the coast, right, you are some sort of small farmer in the Pennsylvania area, right? But we're going to begin to have a market revolution, right? So that's sort of the first idea here. We're going to move from sustenance agriculture to commercial agriculture, okay? And that's not just true of plantations, right? Smaller farms are going to begin to try to do the same thing, okay? that's going to try to create economic activity. Economic activity is aimed at creating a middle class. The middle class is aimed at creating a better quality of life. Okay? That's the idea. We're going to try to generate some level of wealth in order to increase the general quality of life, our standard of living, right? And we'll talk about this as we move forward, because you will begin to understand that there are things that happen in terms of our quality of life, like leisure time, free time, that did not exist prior to this point. Okay? Prior to a market revolution, prior to commercialism, prior to industrialization, people do not have free time. You wake up at 6 a.m., you go milk the cows, you feed the chickens, you bale some hay, all the way until the sun goes down, and then you go to bed. And then you get up the next morning and you do it all again. Right? And you might get a small break on Sunday if you're religious in order to praise Jesus. And that's, but also I want you to understand, you are working for your own survival, yes? You are working for your own prosperity, your own opportunity, your own life. That's very different than going into a commercial setting. I'm going to be honest with you. Listen to me. Do not ever be great at your job. Don't do it. Words to live by. Don't do it. Now, you might want to be great at your career. There's a difference, right? How many of you have a job right now? Reagan, where you work? Westwood Gymnastics. Do you work with anybody that's incompetent? Like terrible at their job and have no idea what they're doing? Yes, you do, right? What do those people do? Do they get paid like the same amount as you? Do they do less work than you do? Yeah. So why are you good at your job? They get paid the same amount and do less work because they are incompetent. Why are you good at your job? Why wouldn't you also choose to be incompetent, get paid the same amount, and work less hard? Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, just free advice from me to you, okay? All of you will find people who don't like you, okay? I can't count high enough to list the number of people that don't like me, okay? I'm old enough to have stopped caring though, right? But this is my point. So once we get into, because you realize, like, I don't know what you make. Let's just pretend for the sake of argument here you make $10 an hour, because it's nice round numbers, right? If you're making $10 an hour, how much do you think your boss is making? Maybe 25, right? Is your boss the actual owner of that business? No. So now you have some sort of owner of that business. Does the owner of the business ever show up? No, almost no? I mean, like, well, it depends on the business. But here's the thing. So you're working for somebody that owns the business that you are working at. You almost never see them yet. They're making money off of your labor, aren't they? Why are you busting your butt so somebody else can get richer? For not working. What?
It's their idea.
Because we need money.
Oh, okay, and I'm not telling you to be a bum and be lazy and just sit on the street. What did I tell Reagan? Don't be good at your job. Just be average. Do you know what really happens when you're good at a job like that?
They expect more.
You have to do more, and do you get a raise? No. Oh, you got like a quarter raise? It's okay.
It's got a raise for me at my job.
Bro, I didn't.
I used to get paid $12.
Okay, interestingly enough, this is not a conversation for U.S. history, but interestingly enough, like from an economic financial standpoint, you would actually be far better off not trying to get raises from your job, right? But rather like spend 2 or 3 years in your job and then go move to another job, because hiring budgets are generally significantly larger than like internal promotion raise budgets. And right? Because it's harder to attract people. It's actually relatively easy to keep them, right? Because most of us, and I'll be honest with you, like, this is just good free life. This is all going on camera. This is probably not a bad idea. Free good life lessons for you. Like, don't quit a job or a significant other until you have a better one lined up. I'm the job is true. The other one, don't do that. That means you're already out of that relationship and you should just leave. But the job is true. Don't quit a job until you got a better one lined up. Right? Okay, but a lot of people don't actually go actively seek new jobs. Right? Okay, I be looking for jobs almost every day.
Really?
Yeah. Why? Because if LCISD becomes unconducive to my way of life, right? If I could go make substantially more somewhere else, why wouldn't I go take advantage of that?
Fair enough.
I mean, Reagan, do you feel like your company has any loyalty to you? Like, so you do gymnastics? You're like a coach for gymnastics? So if you broke your leg, okay, no loyalty, right? You probably couldn't do your job then, could you? Would you still get paid? Probably not, right? So they don't have a lot of loyalty to you. Why would you have a lot of loyalty to them? And
Life lessons are going crazy right now.
all right, so let's get back to U.S. history then. All right, so as we enter into this new period in history, this gets wildly complex because you really can't have, like, I like linear things. I like being able to tell you, like, A happened, so then B happened, so then C happened, so then D happened. Yes? It doesn't work that way this time. Okay? Because you cannot have A without B, you cannot have A without C, you cannot have A without D, you can't have B without C or B. Basically, a handful of things all have to transpire at the same time. A bunch of things all have to transpire at the same time in order for all of this to occur, right? I cannot have commercialization unless I have a transportation revolution as well, right? Because I can't engage in commerce where I'm shipping things all over the country if I don't have a means of shipping, right? So there has to be some sort of transportation revolution that is occurring as well. And there's a number of different things that will happen here. So one, we actually begin to build roads, like state-funded roads, right? That means that the government is going to build roads. Interestingly enough, the government did not used to build roads, right? In fact, even after this point, when we get to like the Oklahoma land rush, the government gives away land at various points in time in American history, and one of the requirements to keep like 160 acres worth of land is you have to build a house, dig a well, and build a road. You have to build the road, not the government. Pretty much, but it's about clearing. It's about clearing the land. So you clear a road. So you have to like cut down the trees and dig them up. But you're cutting down the trees to build your house anyway. So you just cut it down in a line.
Okay, so it's just like a path that's.
Oh yeah. Yes. No. We're not like concrete asphalt roads yet. No. That doesn't happen until like the 1960s. Right? I mean, that's really the Interstate Highway Act when we get to Ike Eisenhower, like near the end of second semester. All right, but so we're going to have roads, canals, steamboats, railroads. All of this stuff is going to be part of our transportation revolution, right? So water transportation first and foremost. Obviously, it should not surprise you. We've been traveling by water for a long time. There are two ways to travel by water, yes? Right? One is using wind power. That's where you have sails, right? I can use wind power to go in the direction that I want to go, interestingly enough, regardless of how the wind is blowing. I can actually go directly into the wind in a sailboat. How? You have to go at an angle. You have to go like that, right? So basically it's about positioning your sails correctly to catch the wind. And if I want to go, like, let's say I wanted to go to Beckett and the wind is blowing directly at at me, right, I would go toward the board, right, and then I would go back. Okay? Because I can set my sails up in specific ways to catch that wind, even though it's coming this way to push me that way. But obviously I can't go straight at him, because if I just put the sail straight up, I'm going backwards. Right? I've got to angle that sail. That's one way. What's the other way?
Engine.
We don't have engines yet.
Oh, it's a steamboat.
Well, that's what we're getting to. I'm talking about prior to the steamboat.
You just got a regular boat.
You can row. Road.
Okay, you ain't rowing up the Mississippi anywhere soon. Just go with the current.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you realize that I can tie like a bunch of logs together in St. Louis, Missouri, and eventually end up in New Orleans? Just gotta sit there, because the current of the Mississippi River will take me to New Orleans. Right? Will I go? Yeah, I'll go past Memphis and Vicksburg and whatever else, right? Like, I don't know. There's St. Louis. Where's St. Louis? There? I don't know. Somewhere here. Okay? Float down. In fact, do you understand how this works? Like, we probably didn't talk about this. So let's say for the sake of argument, I've got a cotton plantation just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, right? And I need to get my cotton down here to New Orleans in order to put it on a boat to ship it to England, right? So in 1830, what do?
You ship it, you put it on a boat, and you let it float down the river.
So basically, I build a raft, right? Okay, and I load all that cotton onto the raft, and I float it down the Mississippi River until I get to New Orleans, right? And then I like steer myself over to the side, because I'd have some sort of rudder on there, right? Steer myself over to the side, unload it. I would actually then like take the raft out of the water, sell all the lumber from that, right? And then I would buy like a horse, get on a horse, and ride back to my plantation in Memphis. Because I'm not going back up the river.
Going downstream is with the current. What about going back upstream?
Well, back upstream, you'd have that power. And that's where steamships come in, right? Because you could go downriver easily. That's easy. The current is taking you. Okay? Upriver is significantly harder. Robert Fulton is the guy who creates the first steamboat. Okay? And so once we have steamboats, now we have two-way travel on large navigable rivers like the Mississippi. Okay? That's significant. Next, we're going to create canals. Can anybody know what a canal is? It's a water road, sure, I like that. It's a man-made river. Rare river. It doesn't have a current. Right? The Panama Canal, I mean, the two most famous canals in the world are the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. Right? So if you look at my map up here, the Panama Canal, like, cut a little line through Panama down here. We'll talk about that eventually, because the United States creates the country of Panama in order to build that canal. Panama used to be a part of Colombia. Yeah, that's Colombia, that's Panama. We tried to buy that from Colombia. Colombia said no thanks. So we started a revolution in Panama, got Panama to get its independence, and then we bought it from Panama. How white of us. I mean, honestly, just how, like, America was, really. America does stuff like that all the time. Oh, just wait until we get to, like, the 1970s and the CIA. That would be fun, right? The other main one here that everybody knows is the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, which then brings you out into, like, the Indian Ocean. So you can get from Europe to India significantly faster without going all the way around Africa down here, right? Okay, in the United States, we're going to create the Erie Canal. Okay, so this is the Erie Canal up here on the board. All right, the Hudson River. I don't know. Can y'all see this? The Hudson River. So this is the Hudson River. The Hudson River comes out of the mouth of New York, right? So like, y'all know that movie with Tom Hanks where they landed the plane that was going down? He lands it in the Hudson River. Okay. All right. So that's the Hudson River. It's in New York City. travel the Hudson River north, right? Eventually you'll get to sort of upstate New York, right? And then we decide we want to have a way to get from New York to New Orleans internally. Okay? Because the canal goes in, right, to Lake Erie, and then from Lake Erie we can traverse through the Great Lakes and then south, right? Okay?
So they're trying to go from east, get to the Great Lakes, and then try to go south.
Yeah, so we go east, so basically we go north on the Hudson River, right? Because the Hudson River runs south. Most rivers in the northern hemisphere run south, most rivers in the southern hemisphere run north. And unless they run east to west. But if they're running north or south, they go toward the equator. I'm not sure why that is. There are exceptions. There are exceptions to that rule. But that's a relatively accurate statement. Not that you would ever need to know that. But so you would go up the Hudson River. Now you need a steamboat to do that. Then you would cross the Erie Canal, right? And the way canals work is they basically they have channel locks. Do we know what that is? So canals are built over rocky terrain. That's why rivers aren't there in the first place. Yes? Because if it was flat, you could just flood the area, right? By building a dam and diverting water sources. That wouldn't be hard. Okay? If you've never been to Panama, Panama is incredibly mountainous. Anybody actually been to Panama in here? No? I don't know. It's on my list of places to go someday. Right? But Panama is very mountainous, right? So how do you get a ship to go over a mountain?
You go around it.
Nope, I want to go through it.
You go through it.
I don't want to have to go around the bottom of South America. I want to go straight through Panama to get from the Caribbean to the Pacific real fast.
Make like a little foot dent in.
So this is what you do. Okay? It's basically like a tiered system. So if I've got a mountain like this, right? There's my mountain, right? So there's the Caribbean Sea and here's the Pacific Ocean. Yes? And I'm going to build locks in here. Okay? So the ship goes in, okay? Then I'm going to flood this lock until it rises up here, right? My ship floats, yes? Then it becomes level with this lock, and I pull the ship forward. I drain this off so it goes back down. I flood this, and it goes up. And then when I get over, right, now I just do the opposite. So the ship is here. I flood this one until it rises, bring the ship over, then drain it, and the ship goes back down. Look at that. Now you're all learning science up in here. Oh, guys, no. Make no mistake. This is not an easy endeavor. Oh yeah, going through the Panama Canal, and mind you, the Panama Canal is only, I don't know the exact distance. Somebody can look it up because y'all don't put your phones away anyways. But it's not it's not super wide, right? It's only 12 miles, 15 miles. It's not that wide, right? But you're talking you going 15 miles in a day, an entire day, right? Next, railroads, right? Railroads are going to be the next and probably easier thing, right? Because again, conceptually, if we have a steamship, we can take that engine and put it on a locomotive, right? We can put it on a train, okay? So now you're dumping coal into a furnace. That furnace is giving off heat. That heat is turning something. That's how you create energy, yes? Okay, again, science now. We're doing science up in here. Okay? If we're shoveling coal into a furnace on a boat in order to turn a propeller, right, we do the same thing with a train. Okay? Trains are now going to be significantly easier as well because we don't have to worry about pre-existing waterways that we're trying to connect. I can literally just build trains anywhere I want. right? I will show you in January when we get to the actual Industrial Revolution, we talk about this in more depth, I will show you some pictures, right? Like overlays of like, here's all the trains that existed in train tracks that existed in 1830, and here's all the train tracks that exist in like 1880, right? And so in 1830, we don't have a great deal of train tracks in the United States. By 1880, good Lord, they're just everywhere, right? But this is going to create economic expansion and economic growth. It's going to increase connectivity amongst different areas of the country, and again, makes it easier for people to interact with one another, to sell products to one another, right? We'll get into this again in more detail when we get to the actual transportation revolution, as it pertains to the Industrial Revolution, because then you'll learn about like Amazon of 1880, because there was Amazon in 1880. Not like the Amazon you know, right? But same concept. You buy stuff and they ship it to your house. You don't even have to go to a store. Yeah. Just use the railroads. You need to write down what? The 1825? No. No, you guys, I won't test your dates. You just need to know that this is early, it's before the Civil War, but that's where we're at time-wise. Okay? But you need to understand that this is the beginnings of the concept, because you cannot have industrialization and urbanization and these things without some of these things that are occurring, right? Next, communication, right? We need to have some sort of communication revolution as well, right? If we're going to increase transportation and increase connectivity, communications is also a significant increase in connectivity, right? And so eventually we're going to have like Samuel Morse and Morse code and like the telegraph, okay? But what we do is that we're going to start increasing communication by increasing the number of post offices that exist, okay? Then when you start considering the transportation revolution and the fact that we now have roads are significantly easier to traverse, that makes it easier for mail to travel from one city to the next. Railroads are going to do the same thing, okay? Once we have significant increases in the ease or availability of communication, right, from an economic standpoint, that then decreases the cost of communication, right? So if it's difficult for me to get a newspaper from Houston, Texas to, I don't know, San Saba, right? Anybody know where that is? Do you really?
Oh yeah, that's where we got my dog.
Nice.
You went all the way to San
No, we lived in Fort Worth then.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. I'm like, well, that's like west of Dallas. Yeah, like.
That's not far. We went to Florida and I don't know. And we were from, she was sometimes.
Okay, this is why I don't do pets, man. I don't understand y'all. Okay, so, but you understand, if it's difficult for me to get a letter from Houston to San Saba, right? Okay, then it would be relatively expensive, yes? But if it's easy for me to get a letter from Houston to San Saba, all right. Say you're allergy. You look like you got allergies, Bob, man. Sorry. Well, I don't think he's gonna cry, but his eyes are all puffy like he's got a sinus infection. All right. So anyway, this is gonna decrease the cost, right? The cost of communication, which means you're gonna decrease the cost of newspapers and things like that. That's going to benefit everybody because that's more access to information, right? And again, I already talked about this, right? Well, like the fact that we have roads now, so you've got the Pony Express where people are sending mail on horseback all over the country. Basically, a whole bunch of horses that are employed by the United States Postal Service, right? And so what you can do, anybody know anything about horses? Horses are beautiful, like majestic creatures. Good Lord, are they dumb as boxes of rocks. They actually are. You know, a horse will literally run itself to death? Like, it's not smart enough to stop itself if it's, like, on the verge of dying from exhaustion.
You know when it's exhausted?
What? How do we? Well, one, you would need to understand horses fairly well. But this is actually one of the reasons why this happens, right? So what they can do is they can ride a horse hard for, 40 miles, 50 miles, whatever it is, okay, depending on the terrain and whatnot, and then stop at another one of these locations and trade out horses and then keep going. Right? Because if that's your means of transportation, you gotta keep going, right? You don't wanna keep running the same horse into the ground. You need to be able to give that horse a time to recover and eat and drink and whatnot, right? I already told you this, Morse is gonna create the telegraph. We're gonna create telegraph lines, right? Telegraphs are basically just electrical impulses going along a line, right? With a whole bunch of like dots and dashes, okay? And then those dots and dashes equate to words and letters and things like that, okay? That's gonna make it to where we can transmit information over significantly long distances very, very fast, okay? And at that point, right, once we have that level of connectivity, it's going to create a whole bunch of advantages in terms of economic opportunity, right? Plus, just so you understand, in order to do all of this, you understand that just the very creation of railroads and canals and telegraphs creates jobs, yes? Right? The government has to pay somebody to lay train tracks. The government has to pay somebody to put up, like, telephone wires, because that's essentially what the telegraph is going down. Right? So we have to lay those wires everywhere. We have to put up those poles everywhere. Okay? This is going to create an opportunity for the government to begin to become more involved in what's going on. Okay? And as the government gets more involved, that's going to create additional problems because we have a division regionally between the North and the South who are at odds with one another, right? And so that's going to create some issues because as one side is trying to industrialize and the other side is trying to remain agrarian, right? They're going to disagree on how things occur. They're going to disagree on whether or not the government should basically be providing land to farmers who want to work the land and grow crops or whatever, right? They want to work it agriculturally versus providing land to corporations that are laying railroad track and doing things like that for internal improvements. And
Wait, so say if somebody wanted to send like a mail, like somebody wanted to send like a letter to somebody else, like
Okay.
far, far away. So they would write
today or then?
no, back then.
Back then, okay.
They would write down like where the person lives, like their road that they built near their house.
No, so for the most part, what you're looking at is, actually, I don't know when postal codes began, now that I think about it, right? But a lot of the times, letters were brought to a centralized location, right? Like in the South, it might be the plantation, for instance. And if you were the plantation owner in, I don't know, Augusta, Georgia, right? You would know pretty much everybody, right? Like you are essentially the head of the community there, right? In which case, if the letters all came to you, right, you could either disperse those letters or people would come by and you know, get things from you or say hi to you or whatever, like pay respects, and you could just give it to them at that point, right? If you had like town halls, like governmental town halls, it could go there, and as people come into town to do things, they could go and check. Kind of like the concept of a post office box. People didn't have, to the best of my knowledge, nobody had like a mailbox outside their home.
So okay, so the mail or whatever, it wasn't sent to that person's house. It was usually sent to like a main house. Or
Yeah, it would be sent. Think about it as being sent to a post office, right? And so it would have like it would have your name, and then it would say like Fulshire Post Office, right? And then it would be like box 26 or whatever. Maybe they wouldn't even have a box number, but the post office just knows what box you've got because the communities are small at this point, right? You're not talking about having to know thousands of people. You're talking about having to know dozens of people or dozens of families, right? Like you might get a letter as a child and they're like, okay, well I don't know who you know, Henderson is, right? Like I don't know who Scott Henderson is, but I know who Jim Henderson is, and I'm just going to assume that's the same family, right? That sort of concept. Okay, so again, I told you a second ago, really the Industrial Revolution that is occurring pre-Civil War is predominantly occurring in Europe. Okay? Right? And there are a couple of things that happen in the United States that matter to me, right? And so I want to at least cover a couple of American technological innovations. I don't care that much about this slide, but I want to get to this because there are a couple of things that really do matter in the antebellum era that are significant, right? So one, like the sewing machine. Okay? So the sewing machine is significant because it's going to allow people to create clothing at home. Okay? That's going to increase the market for local textiles, right? Because, do we know what textiles are? Fabrics. Okay? Just think fabrics, not finished products, right? But like, you know, if you go to like a craft store today, you can go buy like sheets of velvet or sheets of cotton or whatever. Yes? You can. Like craft stores. Okay, I had a girl, I think she graduated last year, that like made all of her own clothes. Yeah. Like she's going to college to be like a set designer for, or a costume artist for like Hollywood. Like that's her career aspirations. She's going to some weird, I forget where Kendall's going to school. Somewhere like Washington State? I don't know. She had to go somewhere weird because it's a very like niche market. But like that's what she wanted to do. And I mean like the stuff she made was beautiful. And it was like she could make time specific, like period type clothing. You know what I mean? Like stuff that looked like it was made in 1880. It was impressive. Okay? But the sewing machine is going to allow people to basically buy textiles and make their own clothes rather than buying finished goods. Alright? This is probably the singularly most important invention in American history. Baker. You sure? Okay, because I should have all these kids the same because it's still second period. Okay. Okay, I don't understand what she was saying. Okay, this is the singularly most important invention in American history. It's not the most important invention in the world. Okay.
Please pardon this interruption, students and staff. We are going to be doing a couple of drills in the last 10 minutes of this class period. Once again, these are going to be drills. The first drill we're going to be doing is going to be a secure drill. Once again, a secure drill. At this time right now, we are now in the secure drill. Get inside, lock outside doors. Students, return inside. Business as usual. Teachers, please bring everyone indoors. Lock outside doors. Increase situational awareness. I count for students and adults. Do business as usual. During school secure drill, we are locking all the exterior doors. Right now, we are in the drill.
All exterior doors shut. We're not shut.
In that past slide, it showed the guy who was something Goodyear, and it was saying that he was making
Charles Goodyear?
rubber. Yeah, and I was wondering if it was that same guy, his family's legs
Yes.
or whatever.
Should be. Yeah, it should be. Yeah, you actually know rubber comes from trees?
Yeah, it's from
Really?
like dried
Well, don't they have
sap.
synthetic ones?
Yeah, the rubber that you think of now is synthetically made.
But it's from
But
like
originally,
sap.
rubber comes from like a rubber tree that I think is indigenous to Southeast Asia. Is Brazil? Is it indigenous to Brazil too?
Sounds pretty cool.
I don't know. But it's basically the sap out of a tree. We figure out how to make it like non.
Is that the bird?
Who is Barbara Sherrod? What? She's a teacher here?
She's a teacher here. Yeah.
Why is a teacher initiating the drill? Whatever.
Just cause.
Alright, let me get through this before we run out of time, because I think we're actually going to go into a like lockdown here in a minute. Okay? I want to make sure you understand this. So, the cotton gin is the singularly most important invention in American history. And the cotton gin is singularly important for two main reasons. Number one, anybody know how cotton works?
Yeah.
You know it's like a plant, yes?
Yeah.
Right, so it bulbs, right, it flowers. I don't know if they've got cotton fields up here, right, where I used to teach, there's one of those cotton fields right across the street. Okay, so it blooms, right, it opens up, you go in there and you pick, like, the cotton out of the flower, yes? And then inside of that, like, wisp of cotton, right, like, think of a cotton ball, except it's not very compact, right? There's a thin, long seed, okay? And so it's like it's almost like a needle, right? And then to get all of those needles out of there, like you have to dig in and like pull them out one by one. That is incredibly time consuming. Okay, the cotton gin changes that. It's basically a little box with a crank that has like teeth on the inside, and so the teeth are coming across like this, right? And they're separating, they're pulling the cotton to the outside, and then the seed falls down in the middle. Okay, so now the seed is separated from the cotton, and it's fast, right? Significantly fast. So that's going to make the production of cotton way more profitable because now it's not nearly as labor intensive, right? So now more people are going to want to produce cotton. The other thing, and most teachers don't teach this, but what I find fascinating about the cotton gin, right, is that this is one of the early examples in American history of interchangeable parts. You know what that means?
Yeah.
It's not one.
It's not one thing. Like, you understand, if the brakes go out on your car, do you just throw the car away and go get a new one?
No.
No, you replace the brakes, right? Same concept here. So if that crank breaks, you can replace the crank. If one is like the teeth break, you can replace the teeth. You don't have to buy a whole new thing. Okay? And so that's significant for a couple of reasons. Because one, right, it increases production in terms of like parts. So you have spare parts laying around. Two, right, it makes that machine even more accessible for people because now in the event that something happens to it, they don't have to replace the entire thing. They can replace just one small component of it and continue with their production, right? So this is going to make cotton the most profitable product in American history. And so you're going to see as a result of this some significant shifts in terms of demographics in the United States, right? Because prior to the cotton gin, anybody know where the majority of slaves are?
In the cotton field.
South U.S.
Well, they're all in the South U.S. Let's be a little bit more specific. Can you give me a state?
Carolina.
That's two of those. Can you give me one of them?
South.
South.
No. So South Carolina has the highest per capita slave population, meaning that they've got more slaves per white person than any other state. Okay, but they do not have the largest number of raw slaves, right? Meaning just raw numbers. Okay? That is actually further north in Virginia and North Carolina because that's where tobacco is being grown. Tobacco is also relatively labor intensive. Okay? Now, there are some southern, like deep south plantations that are sugar plantations. We'll get to that eventually. Sugar plantations are just absolutely terribly atrocious, right? If you were on a certain sugar plantation as a slave, your life expectancy is like 30 to 35. Right? You will die that young because of how difficult it is to like take sugar cane and like stomp it out and make molasses out of it. It's wildly difficult. Okay? But what happens now as a result of this? Does cotton grow in Virginia and North Carolina?
Thank God very
No.
much. The security drill has now ended. We're now going to do our second drill. That's going to be a shelter drill. Shelter.
Nope, that's the same thing.
Using a safety strategy. Students, use your appropriate safety strategy for the hazard. Teacher, lead safety strategy. Account for students and adults. Notify if missing, extra report injured students or other adults. This hazard would be for a tornado, a hazmat spill, earthquake. Safety strategy, evacuate to the shelter area, seal the room. In an earthquake, you would drop, cover, and hold. At this time, we are now in a shelter drill. Thank you.
No, they don't have earthquakes here. You're fine. No, guys. Believe it or not, like this, you actually ought to be prepared for this. We had 6 or 7 years ago, whatever it was, at George Ranch, we had a tornado that went right by the school. Okay, like it ripped down houses that were right across the street from the school. Okay, but we were in a hold for a good. We were in shelter for like an hour and a half. We lost power. The first period basically ran no windows in here, nothing changes. Okay, so I can just continue on as usual. All right. So back to the cotton gin here, and what's happening, right? So the cotton gin is going to make cotton most profitable. So now tobacco becomes secondary, right? And we want to produce cotton. Where is cotton produced?
South Carolina.
North Carolina.
No, you got to go further south and west, right? Cotton is predominantly what we call a deep south. So we're going to be looking at like Mississippi, Louisiana, and then into Texas, eastern Texas. Right? Because hopefully you realize, if you understand geography at all, like where we live is geographically more similar to Louisiana than it is to El Paso, even though El Paso is still Texas, yes? Okay, we are geographically more similar to Louisiana than we are to Dallas, even though Dallas is still Texas.
It's more of the.
Yeah, because we're coastal. We have bayous. We have the same sort of general climate and whatnot as what Louisiana does and in Mississippi, right? So that's going to result in a significant sort of gold rush-esque concept where people are flooding into that area, buying up land, buying up property, trying to create cotton plantations. Cotton is going to become incredibly significant, okay? And as a result, that's going to increase the necessity or the need for slaves, right? Because again, yes, it's now really, really easy to separate cotton from the seed, but you still got to go out and pick it all, right? And so that's relatively labor intensive, okay? The great thing about it is you can actually like have, say, adults, right? Like 18, 19, 20-year-old slaves out in the field picking all the cottons. You could have a 13-year-old working the cotton gin. Right, like that doesn't require a lot of like force and labor and like skill, okay? But that's going to lead to an increase in the desire for slaves in the United States, which is going to get into some really nefarious concepts, right? Because then Virginia, right, their economy is now in shambles as a result of tobacco not being a thing. They can't grow cotton, right? So what do they have that's valuable? Slaves. Virginia actually gets accused, and it's like wrong, it's suspect, of breeding slaves for profit and then selling them. The term is downriver, meaning into like the Mississippi area, like selling them further south onto cotton plantations as a way of trying to recoup financial losses. All right, so that's the slave production and slavery as it pertains to the United States. Because remember, you need to understand, we are not importing any more slaves. That ended as soon as we could end it. Right? So that ends in 1809. As soon as we can deny the importation of slaves in the United States, we're going to stop importing them. That doesn't mean that we get rid of slavery, and that doesn't mean that slaves gain their freedom. Okay? And so as a result, any slave that is born, any slave that bears a child, that child is also a slave. Okay? That's going to create, I mean, that's essentially God, I hate saying it this way. That's essentially a product, though. Right? Like, you understand that? If I am a slave owner and my slave has a child, that child is now a commodity that I can sell. Right? Not a very pleasant way to think about history, but that's what it is. All right? So we'll stop there. I will finish this tomorrow.